Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We have assembled the titans of real estate, licensed in the early 80s, beginning their careers in some of the most tumultuous markets that Alberta's ever experienced. And we just really wanted to have a conversation and learn from their experiences and benefit from their wisdom. So thank you guys for joining me on the meeting. I appreciate your time.
You're most welcome. Yeah, good to be here.
All right. Yeah. Let's start with a quick introduction. We'll chat about when you got licensed and really what inspired you to get into the industry. And why don't we start with Mr. Russ Austin, who was on our management team for 30 years and helped create CIR and build it to what we have become today. So, Russ.
Hey, thank you. Yeah, as I look back, I'm the rookie of this bunch, or the kid. I started October 19th, 1987, and if you plug that into Google, you'll find out that it was called, referred to as Black Monday. The day I started, the stock market fell 22.6% in one day. And people were walking around the office saying, we're never going to do another deal again. So I thought that was interesting. I wasn't quite sure what they were talking about, which was a good thing. So went from there, started in 87 with another brokerage, moved here on May 5th, 88, and have been with CIR ever since. Started managing in 97. So that's me.
Awesome.
You're there with Steve.
Tony, let's go to you next. Tony is our longest serving agent. I mean, you deserve so much recognition in your contributions to the brokerage. So thank you for your time.
Okay. Yeah. Can you hear me okay? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I started in real estate in October of 76. And the 70s were great. They were just fantastic. But come March of 82, the mega projects up at Fort McMurray just hit a brick wall. And as I see it, our economy went downhill in a big way. I mean, I had mortgages of 18.75% on properties and was really scrambling. And I joined CIR in January the 1st, 1984, and I've been with CIR ever since. But do you want me to talk about the time from 82 onwards was really brutal. I mean, what properties that you would have bought in 81 were worth approximately half of what they, by 1986 was the bottom. And then we slowly climbed out back up to about 91. And it was about 10 years really for a full, complete recovery. From 82 to 91 was about 9 years or so. And it was pretty brutal, I can tell you. How we hung on was unbelievable, but we did. And then from the 90s wasn't that bad, you know, and even into the 2000s.
Nice.
But,
let's chat about
that's me.
Awesome. Appreciate that, Tony. Colin.
Yes.
One of our top 5 agents. Actually, it's interesting enough. We have 3 of our top 5 agents for longevity on this group. So thank you. How about you, Colin?
Well, I got interested in real estate probably about 5 years before I got into real estate in 1981. And what I was doing was buying property and fixing it up, flipping it, building suites, doing things like that. And by 81, things were going pretty well. It was, you couldn't lose, like Tony has just said. And then it was at that point I decided, well, I would like to get into the business, just get me a little closer in the inner circle of what's going on in real estate. So I did get licensed in May of 81. And I had a taste of a great market back then in 81 through the summer of 81. And what happened was the NEP came in I think it was November of 81. And when that happened, it absolutely crushed the market. You know, our ads that we'd run in the Herald, and we spent a lot of money back then. You know, it wasn't uncommon to spend $600 a month at that point, and that was a lot of money. And what happened was it absolutely just went flat. The number of listings shot through the roof. And I remember phoning an appraiser who'd been around forever. His name is well, he's with Smelsky, Wally Smelsky. Anyway, what this I know Lauren Grenke. I phoned Lauren.
Lauren Grenke, yeah.
Yeah, I phoned Lauren in January. Keep in mind that I was hanging on to a bunch of property, and like Tony said, our interest rates were absurd. So I phoned Lauren and I said, Lauren, do you see this market going down 10%? And this was at that in January. And he said, very soft-spoken student of the industry, and he just said, "Oh, I think although the sales haven't reflected it, it's already gone down 20-25%. And when we start seeing sales, that's where it's going to be." But he said, "There's going to be a second wave now." And he says, the second wave is going to be the one that's going to leave blood in the streets and everybody muttering. He says, it will go down another 25%. So you do the numbers on it and it correlates to what Tony's saying, and it went down 50%. And in some rough areas, it went down 60%. In your strong areas, inner city, things like that, maybe 40%. Okay. So anyway, he said, it'll be that second wave that's going to all the 10%, all the baby boomers that have bought and they're 10% in, they're going to be throwing their keys in. One, they might be unemployed. They're underwater on their mortgage. Can't afford the interest rates. They're going to throw their keys in. And that's what went off. So you had the first initial wave, and then wham, it was a second wave that really, you would have, 2 years before, no, this couldn't happen. And I can remember looking at my bank account and I had $56 in it.
Wow.
And that was it.
Wow.
Yeah.
I want to come back and talk about that first and second wave, but we can't go without the introduction of Mr. Dick Brown, newest to CIR, but ironically licensed on the same day as Colin Sloan. So, Dick, take the floor.
You want me to think that far back?
If you can remember.
Yeah. My memory's not too bad. Anyway, I was transferred to Calgary by the Royal Bank in 1973. And this was a place that I really enjoyed. But in 76, I was transferred back to Montreal. And my friends here said, don't go. Why don't you get into real estate and stay here? That's when the market was booming, in 76 there up through to 80. And I said, no, I've got to do this. So finally, I ended up in Toronto, and I decided I missed Calgary because this was the one place after 18 transfers that I really felt I'd like to live, because I'd made a lot of friends here and I enjoyed it and whatever. So I come back with Guarantee Trust, worked and signed a deal to work with them for 6 months. That way they paid my way back. And after about a year, I had to give them 6 months notice because I wanted to get into real estate. And while I was working for them, I got my real estate license. And when I started in real estate, my first deal was the secretary that I had in Guarantee Trust. So I listed her house for sale. Anyway, started with Royal Trust back then, and then Royal Trust became Royal LePage, and I hung in there for a number of years. But I started the exact month that I thought the market started to turn down with condos and high-end prices. That was like August 81. And when I really started to work, well, for the next 5 years, the market went down. I was going up. And so I had business when nobody else did because I never burned any bridges at the Royal Bank. And I was getting transfers, people that I knew, and I was getting mortgage foreclosures. And I even had some of the guys that in the lending arm, they would call me when they were dealing with a client, and the client said my house is worth $400,000. Well, they didn't know for sure, so they'd get me to do a drive-by and give them something for their file that gave them a bit of an opinion that they were getting the straight bill of goods. Anyway, so I got involved. I had 7 properties when I started in real estate. And of course, I leveraged them all at the Royal Bank. And then when the market started to turn down, I was subsidizing them all. So I had to start selling. So wouldn't you know, the place I lived went first. And but it took me 10 years, but I got out of that. And kept on trucking in real estate with the most of my business coming from my bank, because I never burn any bridges, which is always a wise thing not to do. And I just kept on working. There were dollar down dealers.
God, lots of those.
Lots of, yeah, they were the guys that in those days you could assume all mortgages were assumable. So these guys took it upon themselves to take people off the hook. They'd buy the place, assume the mortgage, and they'd take over the place, but then they'd rent it out, and they would never pay the mortgage. So they would get 6 or 8 months rent before the mortgage company caught up with them and foreclosed on it. But so they were quite the operation. And then the people were walking into the bank and saying, here's my keys. Here's my keys. I don't see where my house is ever going to be worth more than the mortgage I have against it. So I'm out of there. Then there were the people that just left, and they would take everything with them, because you get a call from the bank to go and list this property. You'd find out that they took everything, including the kitchen stove and all the light fixtures and everything else. And so it was totally a different market. I remember dealing with a foreclosure on Bonavista Drive, and it was in the winter, and the heat went off, or electric went out, the heat went off, and the pipes burst, and man, was it a mess. It was a terrible mess. I haven't heard any of that stuff happening lately, but with interest rates, I know Cease Jardine and I built a house up in Strathcona. The mortgage rate was 20-point-something%, but we managed to get out of that barely. So we just kept on going. And
you said something interesting, Dick.
What's that?
You said something interesting. I'd like to kind of go back to it and get everybody's feedback on this too. But you said that your business continued to rise and you just continued to push forward and focus on the right activities. But let's talk about what you did to build your business, and you were able to create a foundation for your business in the turmoil that you guys have all briefly.
Yeah. What happened? Basically, it's work. I remember people when I was successful, and that was after I was in my first 5 years, because while the market was going down, I was going up. And in my first 10 years, I was in the top 10 in the city 7 times. But I was working. People would ask me, what do you have to do? They get into real estate to make a living there. And I said, well, there's 2 things you have to do. This is aside from the story I told you earlier, but there's 2 things you have to do. One, you have to get up in the morning. And then the second thing, you have to dress yourself. So I guess when you're up in the morning and dressed, you may as well do something. So if you do it enough and you work hard enough at it, then you will be successful. I remember a lot of realtors would go to work and drink coffee and say, "Oh, the market's terrible, so there's just no business out there." But I took the approach that, well, there's some business and somebody's doing some business, so it may as well be me. And
Yep,
or
that's
I may as
exactly
well
right.
be one of them. Eh?
That's exactly right, Dick. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a matter of work, but it's a lifestyle. I realized after I was in it 3 years and the hard work that I'd found my niche. I had the background in banking, which gave me a business acumen that a lot of the housewives didn't have in those days, and and I enjoyed the work, and I enjoyed the people, and I enjoyed meeting new people. And if you just keep at it and do what's right, I used to say, the more successful you are, in real estate, the more successful you will be, because it builds on itself, right? People, they refer their friends and everybody else. And I said, but that's providing you continue to do it the same. If you continue to work hard and look after people, your business will grow. And but if you turn into an alcoholic or you get successful and become arrogant, and nobody in our company here is that. If you do, then people will leave you. Otherwise, they tend to stick with you, and they like to recommend their friends. So, so I nothing but a down market for 5 years. And then it went up for 5 years after January '86, and then it was flat for 5 years. So in that 15 years, between the time I started in '81 and 1995, if you bought a house in '81 and you were selling it in '85 or '95, you might get your money back. You might just get your money back. But what that told me is, in 1995, all the inflation was out of our market. We had no inflation in our market. We just carried on. But then we've had our ups and downs since then too.
It's interesting.
This market isn't, and Colin and Russ, nothing like we went through in the early '80s. Just nothing like it.
Nice. And it's an interesting lesson that so many people have forgotten, is that real estate historically has been a long-term investment, and the equity gains that we saw through the 2000s are just unheard of. But appreciate the insights. And one thing that you always told me that stuck with me, Dick, is that you farmed people instead of farming communities, and you are always very relationship-based. But
that's right. And I still do that. And that's why I'm in the business, because I have a wonderful partnership with Mike Starr, and he's amazing, and he does all the work. I just say, here's a name,
We're gonna have Mike on next week's meeting. So, Colin, how about you? What was your method to the madness to keep your business going in that time?
The term that comes to mind is something I heard from Tony Higgins years ago, and it was debt propulsion. And it stuck with me, and it's true. And at that time, coming out of '81, lost everything, ground zero again, and a very, very dark period for my wife and I in terms of all of this. Anyway,
before that, you're still with your wife.
Sorry?
Oh yeah, you're still with your wife. So.
Oh yeah. That's right.
Gee, let me.
So here, that was largely the motivation. Okay, and it was just pile the hours to it, get up early, just go for it, and that was it. I do like what Dick was saying, and he had that connection with the bank. I didn't have a connection with any bank, and through the tough times, he was the beneficiary of a lot of work coming down from from the the I guess Royal Trust, was it, or Royal LePage?
Royal Bank, but
Yeah.
because I knew so many people in the Royal Bank, they
Yeah.
were transferred.
This is important for the younger people, and that is if they can get the inside track on something like that, some kind of connection like that, where they can get work out of. I think that's an important thing. The other thing that Dick said about getting up early, absolutely up early. The thing I'd add to that would be using your time, like time blocking, and sit down and picture out what you want to get done in the week. Put it down on the day and put it into blocks of whatever it takes to do it. X amount of time for this, that, and the other. So just hard at it and try to do the best job that could, so we get repeat and referral. Repeat and referral is absolutely everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's the biggest thing. You run into a flat market, it's repeat and referral, because if the market's doing 50% of what it was before, it's all right. You'll have a good source. So,
Nice. Good advice.
Yeah.
Tony, what was your secret?
Well, not really any secret, but as both of them said, you get up ready to go to work in the morning, and you got to be ready to go at a moment's notice. But I found that in the 80s, properties that I'd bought in 81 and mortgaged my main house, which I bought back in 73 and still live in it today, I had 18.75% mortgages, but every mortgage I bought down by 3 points. So that if I had to sell at any chance and at any point in the next sort of following 6 months, I'd at least have a better mortgage on the property than the guy next door. And mind you, that cost me sort of $3,000 or $4,000 on the buy down, which may have been a waste of money, but I only mortgaged initially on a 6-month closed mortgage, which allowed me, if I had to bail, I could sell any property that I had. I could sell any property at the end of the 6 months closed without a payout penalty, because I can tell you the payout penalties were huge in those days. And I'm talking this is sort of backstopping 82 through 86. Anyway, I didn't sell anything. Everything was cash flow, which was, thank goodness. And I still have a property in Fairview. It's the first revenue property that I bought. Still have it today. Lots of cash flow coming out of there today, obviously, which I need as a semi-retired guy. And but I was renting out the garage to get an extra $150 a month, which it made all the difference. It made all the difference. The other thing I never did until I never had a brand new car. I just had a good, used, clean car. And I find that a lot of realtors, they make a few bucks. And I say, oh, geez, I want to go and buy that Cadillac or the Mercedes-Benz, and they get overextended that way. And it's essential that you have a good, clean, reliable car, but you don't need the fancy Benz, which is going to cost you 80 or 100 grand. Or if you're leasing it, it's like $700 or $800 a month. Even in a down market, you've got to get rid of that stuff, because you need to keep the doors open and keep working, and you need to get rid of the expensive stuff. And the expensive stuff is sometimes it's not necessary. But even today, I put up my own signs, and that was because it was slightly cheaper. And I got to go and measure the house. I got to go and write the listing. I got to go and press the flesh and put a lockbox on. I may as well put a sign on. So, my 6-pound sledge is in my Chevy Tahoe right now. I'm ready to put a sign up tomorrow on a property. I've done that all along, and it's just those little things of saving $1 here and $1 there can keep you in business. And it all helps, because you got to do what you got to do to stay alive in this business, and sometimes it can be rough, and it was really rough in '81. And as Dick said, you know, the 80s were just terrible. You know, I'd go and see a house, and the guy had thrown the keys at the bank, and there was one. There was the destruction was unbelievable. He was just the previous owner was so mad. You know, he'd taken stuff out, not just the kitchen sink. We're talking ripped the tub out and the toilet, and it was just destroyed. You know, but you know, it was an opportunity for somebody, and I didn't sell that particular property, but I know somebody who did. They took a buyer in there, and he ripped it apart even more and fixed it up and made money at it. And that was in the late 80s. You know, and so this market, it will come back, but when? That's another issue, and we've still got to get our pipelines built to help us here. That's for sure. But as I see this market right now, we could be in for 9 months to a year and a half before we really start ticking, because there's so much debt being incurred, and there'll be a lot of small businesses, unfortunately, will go under, and you know. And we as people need to go out and buy some of our groceries from the smaller businesses rather than the larger businesses. But anyway, that's probably another story for another day.
You said something I think is so incredibly important, Tony, in having multiple income pillars or strategies, in your case, rentals and sales, on top of just being prudent in your expenses and making sure that you're being fiscally responsible, which is something that means so much to me, because it's just proper business. Recently, I heard a quote. Warren Buffett said, "When the tide goes out, you see who's swimming naked." And there's a lot of businesses that have been swimming naked for a long time, and now that they're going to be exposed. So
I'll tell you, when I started in real estate, I had on my wall, nothing happens until somebody sells something. When you think of it, before anything else is going to happen, somebody's got to sell something.
Yeah.
And real estate is the type of business that you're totally involved with. That hasn't changed in my mind. Technology is the only thing that's really changed. Dealing with people and being able to align yourself with your buyers and sellers, that's the key thing today, as it was back then. But technology has changed, and I could tell you that with what's going on today, I would never ever have had the success that I had. But it's the old story. You have to spend money to make money, and I spent lots of it.
Right. Let's jump over to the rookie, Russ.
Here I am. I had the advantage of not starting until 1987, and the market had turned the corner.
Yeah.
It wasn't busy, but the market had turned the corner, so it was positive out there. I remember my first sale was a little house in Ramsey for $53,000. I think my second sale was a standalone 800 square foot bi-level in Pine Ridge for 40. I think we sold it at 48.9 or something. So, you know, when you turn around and looking at commissions on these, there's $1,700, $1,750 before the company split, whatever the situation is there. And then, as Colin said earlier, it was nothing to spend $500, $600 a month marketing through the Herald, because that's where you had to be to get calls, to generate leads, and doing things like that. So when I hit the deck, it was quite a bit different. But the things that were the same, as I said, I started on Black Monday. I knew no different. So I just went out and started working. And part of that was cold calling in the day for at first to generate some leads. And, and then once I realized I could advertise your listings instead of having my own, I started to advertise other people's listings and generate some leads off of those. And when I sit back and relate it to today, I think the herald of that day is just the internet of today. And you've got to find a way to generate leads from it. And not much has really changed overall. The people that have a list and work the list did well off the list then and now. Their business is going to be down 50%, but they're going to do well from the list and keep working at that.
From the realtor's perspective, though, you'll remember, Russ, we used to have to meet. We used to list a house, and the sub-listers would be every other lister, every other realtor in the city, and we would meet the one with the buyer and the offer would come together with the seller and the seller's realtor and present the offer. And as a result, a lot of us realtors, we all knew each other. We were very close because we had done a deal with the other.
We did, and that was part of the enjoyable part of the industry at that time, is you knew other people. You got to meet them. Every time you did a deal, you learned something from how the other agent did it in your first couple of years, especially. So you go through all of that, and then everybody else has stolen my best point. And so it just shows me that it is the big thing. I went to a golf tournament. It ended up in a realtor's house out west of Calgary, and we were partying and whatever. And I said to her, "How the heck do you get up every day and go to work when you've got this beautiful setting here? You just do coffee." She said, "I get up every morning, I go shower, and I put my work clothes on before I make a call, before I do anything. It sets my attitude to be in the work mode." So attitude, get up, get dressed, get ready to go, feel like you're going to work, whether it's just down the hall in your home office or whatever. And I think that's a really, really big part of this.
Yeah, we wake up every morning unemployed as realtors.
Yeah, for sure. I look back at this, and in my first years, I learned an awful lot from people like Tony. Tony, by the way, is the one that referred me to CIR. I was with somebody else. I saw they were going under. I called him and I said, "I need a place to go." He said, "Come to work for Carl." He said, "He's a little tight. As a matter of fact, he's still got the first nickel he ever made, and you're not going to get it." So, I remember having the phone conversation with him. Yeah. So I remember having that phone conversation, and it's what you needed at that time was watch your expenses.
Yeah.
Really keep things under control.
Treat it as a business. It's a business. And
I
very
can
much
tell you,
so.
having
Tony has done the best job of that of anybody that I've seen in the industry. He really watches. And Tony, how many miles on your Tahoe now?
I got close to 300,000, but it looks like new. And as I say, nowadays, of course, times have changed, and we don't pick up our customers anymore. We meet them at the property. But you need to turn up at the property. You need to turn up at the property with a good, clean car, and it doesn't have to be brand new. That's for sure. But the other thing I do nowadays is everybody's a bit more relaxed, and you don't need to put on. Yes, I've got the Armani suit and the Gucci loafers if necessary, but you know what? this is Calgary, and there are more people walking around with a lot of money in their jeans, and they drive a dirty old pickup, and they got blue jeans on. And I tend to, in the last few years, I tend to wear blue jeans all the time. But my hair's cut real short these days. Don't have a lot of it, and I've had a shave, and I'm ready to go to work. But it's critical that you don't. The other thing is don't overdress for your customer. In other words, figure out his comfort, and if you're in the Armani suit and the Gucci loafers, and he's in a pair of jeans and a t-shirt, well, you're matching up with the wrong guy. So you've got to be careful like that. But there was one other thing that I found, and I still do today actually, which keeps me a little bit focused, is there was a guy at CIR called Alan Van Der Zee, I think his name was, and he had a really good way of planning out his week. And every Monday he'd have a clean sheet of paper, and he'd mark out Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And he nowadays you might put it on your iPhone. This is going back into the early 90s, I think it was, at CIR in the downtown office. And I still do that today, actually. It's really quite good. I flip over the piece of paper. Oh, I got to call so-and-so, or whatever. And or I got to pay this kind of bill. Make sure I don't forget to pay the bill. So I guess it's a combination of focus and doing the things that you feel comfortable doing, and just keep chugging along, because nowadays at least we've got, well, you can get, if you've got a job and you're well qualified, you can get a 3% mortgage. So that's a hell of a lot better than it was in the early 80s.
Right.
Yeah, where you made commitments.
So, we never
Steve.
We never talked about this question prior to the meeting, but I'm curious just where this conversation is going. Do you see, there's obviously been some rule changes and adjustments to the way that mortgages were held, and we were taught about the $1 assumptions in the licensing course when I took it 13 years ago. So they've made some changes to offset some of that kind of stuff, but do you see there being any similar risks to this market drop that we've recently experienced that translate back to the 80s, or they've done a pretty good job in adjusting? Does that make sense?
With policy, government policy.
Do you guys see the same risk that, do you see us faced with the same level of risk in today's market as what you guys were faced with in the 80s?
I think the banks and the lenders and the government, they've tightened everything up. It's not as loose as it was way back when. And it's not the same as it was back then. It was kind of the wild, wild west.
Yeah.
Yeah, in terms of dealing with mortgages and things like that. That's not the case today. I don't know, is it risk? Well, it takes the risk away from them, not necessarily the buyer.
Right.
And the banks and the lenders are always going to be working in their interest, not anybody else's.
Yeah, and I think the risk is with the banks, but I think the banks are more reluctant now to go after somebody than they were in the early 80s. I think at that time they just let them walk, and nobody chased anybody.
Right.
When you're indebted to the bank, you've got a risk there for sure. But as far as real estate is concerned, there's no real risk. It's, in my view, so the same as it used to be. If you work hard, you'll get results. If you don't, you won't. And if you're waiting for that big deal, a lot of people think they get into real estate and, oh boy, they're going to make these thousands and thousands. Well, after they find out how much it costs them to make thousands and thousands, they're not quite as enthusiastic, and most of them don't last. I don't know what the figures are now, but a lot of the people that take the exams, I don't know if there's anybody, Colin, that I can think of that was in the class of 81 that's still in the business. But anyway, it's just a matter of work. And if you enjoy the work, if you enjoy it, it isn't work. Because you're doing something you like to do. And nowadays, my only problem with that, if I'm dealing with people, I feel the same. But as soon as I sit in front of that computer, oh God, this isn't my job. I don't know. And I know some people are teaching, and I know Mike is teaching a lot of people good stuff that's going to bear well for them over the years, because it's all touch a button and that's done. When they're doing a deal, and it's a matter of time. You got to put the time into it.
But I find one of the things that a lot of people don't do today, and that's, they probably write the whole deal on the computer, and they barely even see the client. But actually, you know what? When you're belly to belly with a guy who can make the decision, it's much better and it goes much smoother. And also, you just keep in touch with your old clients. And I always find that when you're writing an offer, there's a good rush. It's just a salesman rush, that you think, oh, great, it's good. And even if you don't close it for whatever reason, but it's just the action of writing the offer, and good Lord, there's 17 pages of it nowadays with FinTrack and all the rest of it. And, I used to be able to write an offer on the back of an envelope pretty much. It was a one-pager in those days. And you could make it stick, but you had to create a relationship with these people, and when you're dealing with referrals and repeat business, it's like initial here, sign here, and away you go, and you don't have to do the whole dog and pony show all the time, which for old guys like me is a real pain.
But Tony, it's still as important now as it was then to celebrate success. To celebrate success, to take flowers home to your mother or wife or whoever you got, and do something to acknowledge the fact that you're in sales and you've been successful, and one will lead you to another. And and if you just keep doing it the same and working away at it, you'll be successful nowadays, I think.
Something I just wanted to mention, and it's an important thing what Tony said. And Tony's a landlord. We're all in the business. Anybody watching this, same thing. But early on, he got into properties in the rental. And the one thing about our business is it's brutal in terms of money at the back end. We don't have savings programs or company programs or anything like that. If you got the land, you got something, okay? And you think about it, you end up, well, I think the one that he probably bought in Fairview at that point in time, he might have paid $10 or $11 or $12,000 for, okay? What's it worth today? Who knows, but it's a nice chunk of dough. The other is that when you compare that, I did a little extrapolation between the price of gold back in 66, 67, the price of land, and what it is, the average price today. Now, even when you take the peaks and valleys, and that we've dropped off significantly here, land far outdoes what gold does. Gold today, what, 1650? So what? Yeah. So there's a security in the land, but as realtors, you're in the business, secure something. Get the tenants paying it off. Forget about it. At the back end of it, when you're in your retirement or whatever, you got something.
It helps with your safety.
Colin, I think. Colin, I think, has got something. But Steve, if I don't know whether this is appropriate or not, but as a fairly newcomer to CIR and working for my previous brokerage was more national and international and whatever and big time, I noticed that CIR, and it's what I was told over the years, helps realtors get going, helps realtors in every which way. And that's been proven to me since I've been with CIR, even to the extent of the last meeting I was at, where they were doing a thing on selling your business and selling your company. And I thought, a brokerage, no brokerage that I've ever heard of has done that, helping their realtors sell their business. Really, like it just wasn't done in the old days. And I think that in the conferences or whatever that I've attended, their CIR is right up to the other national company. The difference is they do it with somewhat hands-on, where they're in the same location talking about the same stuff, but not spreading themselves across the country to get it done, if I'm talking sensibly there.
Yeah,
So
appreciate that, Dick. I think the company is fortunate to have the foundation that we have from agents like you guys that have really created the foundation and the leadership that we've had for 37 years. I mean, it's just been, I believe from the conversations and what you guys are saying, and I also think this is probably why each of you have stuck around for so long, but it just aligns so well with the principles of leadership and the fact about real estate is about leadership, or about relationships. Real estate is about being fiscally responsible and operating it as a brokerage or operating it as a business. And it just boils down to getting up, doing the work, being responsible, and keeping in touch, like building relationships. And that's all real estate really boils down to. And you guys are reaffirming that.
Yeah,
leadership.
Integrity.
Yeah, and the leadership in CIR is amazing, because there's hard workers right at the top, and you can tell that. And they're with their realtors in helping them down the road. And boy, in this age of technology, that's key, I think.
Nice. Well, I appreciate that. So I want to make sure that we kind of keep an eye on the time, but if you guys were to give one piece of advice to agents today in what they could implement to help weather the storms, or how to build their businesses, what would be one piece of advice that you guys could offer from your lessons of the 80s and what you've experienced through your careers? Tony, why don't we start with you?
I think I've covered most of it by saying just keep an eye on your overhead, basically, and just make sure that that you're working with a good, solid broker, because in the 80s I was with a broker who was going to go under, and I mean, we're going back to the big companies like Cowley and Keith went down, and a few others, and but I was watching the writing on the wall, and I got out without losing any commissions. But even in fairly good markets, you have brokerages go broke and they close the doors, and you need to watch what's going on. And that's not to say that I'm watching what CIR is doing. I think they're only doing all the right things, but because you may do the deal today and it doesn't close for 2 months, and you want to make sure that your commissions are going to be paid out at the right time. And it could happen down this road here that some other brokerages might go down, but you need to work for a good, solid broker. And that's what Russ mentioned to me, what I'd said. Carl was a good, solid guy, and I knew that he'd be around for a long time, and he has, and so it's imperative that you get hold of your expenses and cut them down to the bone if possible. And, if you've got too many cell phones on the go, get rid of one, and, that kind of stuff. So it basically, running as a business, you know, and watching what's going on all the time. That's my advice.
Thanks, Tony. How about you, Colin? What's your words of wisdom or advice or lessons?
Well, currently, where the market is right now, we kind of have an opportunity on a couple things, and one comes to mind is to sharpen your skill set. And there's great courses; they're online. There's great outfits that are putting them. CIR does a great job of it. There's coaching, there's mentors, but to take this time, if you're slow, to school yourself, to learn. There's read. Great books out there on the subject, YouTube. And then the other thing, but when we get down to the what we can do right now, I think that the biggest thing we can do every day, you get up, clients, 3 to 5 clients a day, phone them up. How are you doing? What's up? What are the kids doing? You know? And just you're present, you're there, and you're keeping in touch with them. 3 to 5 clients, no big deal, a day. Do that. And then the last one is when we're on the street, and we've all seen great examples of it, and that is other realtors dealing with integrity. And what I mean by that is, you know, when we deal amongst each other, take care of each other. You know, it's about the deal, park ego, do a good deal, take care of the other guy. It doesn't mean you're giving up on anything. It just means you don't want to get down a bad road.
Win-win.
Yeah, it's got to be everybody wins. Everybody wins when the keys are given on possession date and we all walk away. And we can do it pleasant or we don't do it pleasant. But to be working within integrity and to do it that way, yeah, it's everything, I think. Anyway. So.
Yeah, good thought.
Am I next, Steve?
Sure.
Next? Okay. Because I'm thinking one of the most important things, I remember when I used to carry one of those great big telephones, you know, that was like a lunchbox that you'd have to use. And I got one right after I found myself stopping my car to go to the nearest telephone booth to get back to somebody because of a deal I was working on, right? So anyway, the communication is still important. But in my view, I used to come home at night and I'd pull out all the little slips of paper out of my pocket and put them on there and say, oh yeah, I've looked after that. Yeah, I called him. Oh, geez, I forgot to call this guy, you know, and whatever. And so it boils down to one thing, that's priorities. Get your priorities straight. And even though they might change, they used to change 10 times a day for me. I'd set out in the morning thinking I was going to do 1, 2, 3 and come home at night and I haven't done any of them because of priorities. So what is your priorities are established by what is going to take you another step closer to getting a deal or selling a property or something, because that's where the fun comes when you get deals together. And priorities are key, even with today's technology.
So if there was one priority, what would your top priority be in a single day?
What do you mean?
Well, just if there was one priority that you could pick that was like, if nothing else, what would that be?
Well, it'd be the out-of-town client. The guy that's in town to buy a house, and he gets top priority because he's going to leave town sooner than you think, and you want to have it all together by the time he does.
Right.
That would be my top, and still is, despite the technology. The difference now is the buyer comes to you much more knowledgeable than he ever was before. Yeah. And you know, people didn't, the public know way more now about values and properties than they ever used to.
You know what's interesting about that is that referrals are becoming higher than they ever have been too, which is, I find it fascinating. And the millennial generation has become the largest generation to ever rely on referrals. And I believe that's because there's so much information out there that they need somebody to decipher that information and tell them what's actually true and what do they need to focus on, and just kind of weed through the noise. So it's interesting.
That's interesting you say that, Steve, because what comes to mind is the quote, we're drowning in information and we're thirsting for wisdom.
Yeah.
And I think that's what realtors, where the true value of it is. It's, if you're good, you know your stuff, you work for them, you work in their best interest, you can do that. You can separate the debris from the gold and take care of them.
Nice. I like that.
I was transferred 18 times when I was with the Royal Bank. So I always knew the realtor that was driving the car, whether he was in it to help me or whether he was in it to get that paycheck.
Right.
You could always, no matter who they were. But so there
Rusty,
you go.
what's your words of wisdom?
Get up, get ready, get dressed, get the attitude going. You know, I hear Dick say he goes home at night and empties his pockets. He needs to meet Tony and see Tony's sheet, because Tony's sheet is a computer in itself long before we had computers. Tony talks about the early 90s. I thought it was the late 80s. He started that, but it is a wonderful system. Prospect is the only thing to do in a day. It's the only thing you need to get done. Get up and make those 3 to 5, 6, 7 calls. You've got all day now, and there's nothing serious on most plates in this marketplace. So if you haven't touched base with your entire database in the last 43 days, since I've been grounded anyway, it's time to get on the phone and touch base with them. That's it. I mean, I had a different experience than you guys because I was in management all those years, and prospecting was different for me. I prospected through you, and it worked very well, but it's the way. Get up and make those calls. But get the right attitude before you do it. You get that by shower, get dressed, get ready for work.
Even if I didn't get home till midnight because I was doing a deal, I'd be at the office the next morning by 8:30 or so, and I'd have a list that I would start calling people. I'd have a list of 5 or 6 people, and I'd call somebody for lunch. And if the first guy couldn't make it, I'd call the second guy and then the third guy or whatever. So even if I didn't take them to lunch, they heard from me that day, you know.
Well, I mean, I am truly grateful for you guys taking the time and spreading or sharing your knowledge and experiences. And I mean, it just really reaffirms for me that we're in the relationship-based business. I've been saying it for years, but if you can't provide more value than a website, then you're going to be out of business. And I think that's what you guys did so well, is just focus on relationships, getting up, getting to work, working with integrity, using systems to manage yourselves and stay on track. And in the end, business takes care of itself if you're focusing on the right activities. So I'm grateful for each one of you. I've learned something from each one of you over the years, and Russ has been a special mentor to me, so I'm especially grateful for that. And thank you.
Well, let's go for a drink now then.
Soon enough.
Wait a minute. My wife's going to make mine. It's called a Martini.
Quarantine.
She's good at it, and she's well trained, you know. So if you guys could do stuff, we'll send you the recipe if you like.
I got to leave you guys with this one. A good buddy of mine, he's at home now. He's, of course, under quarantine. He's with his wife, and then his 2 kids came back from university, and they live in about 1,400 square feet. And he phoned me up and he says, you know, if we ever get out of here, first thing I'm going to join is AA, Weight Watchers, and I'm going for marriage counseling. So,
Makes sense.
Yeah.
All right.
You got,
Thank
the
you
day
guys for your
goes by.
time, and I wish you guys all the best and stay safe out there.
Thanks,
Thanks.
Stevie.
You bet, Stevie.
All right.
thank you for
Take
for
care.
what you do.
Let's do it again
You
sometime.
take care of us, and thank you.
Yeah.
My
Yeah.
pleasure.
See you guys.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks.
Now.
Bye now.
Bye now.
Goodness.